Hey everyone! Welcome to the next exciting episode of the Liquid Weekly podcast. A chance for us Shopify developers to talk Shopify development, learn lots of interesting things, meet lots of interesting people. It's I, your host Karl, as always, my co-host Taylor Page, and today we are excited to welcome Adam, former Shopify developer and now co-founder of Wrapped, a Shopify app focused on gift options and upselling. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, happy to be here.
Yes. So glad you got to come on, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very
It's been months in the making.
Yes, it has. Thanks, Taylor, for setting this all up.
Heck yeah.
First question I have, and then we'll talk about how we're doing this week kind of thing. But Adam, the shirt. I've been reading a lot about microdosing and things like this. Is that a magic mushroom? Is this some sort of illusion? Am I supposed to pick up something here?
It's totally a magic mushroom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
A little covered in dog hair, but yeah, it's a magic mushroom, I think.
Oh, you got a dog?
Is that like
kind of dog
what? Yeah.
Sorry, that was my ADD, Karl.
I was just gonna ask, is that sort of like what do they call those? Like a little indicator of like, hey, should we be asking you about this? Like, is there?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like a colorful. There's like all kinds of weird crap all over this thing.
Nice.
I don't know.
Cool. Sorry, Taylor. I'll defer back to you so that we can answer the dog question.
I say I want to know. I always want to know about the dog. I'm a dog person. I like to know about the dogs.
He's a Siberian Husky. He's pure white.
Nice.
Usually
like boundless amounts of energy, right? Like Huskies.
He's pretty chill.
Much.
Really?
We
always hear that. He's super chill for.
That's awesome.
Husky. Like right now, he's just crashed on the floor over there. So he's past that point, I think, where he's just a total freak, but he has his moments for sure. He's definitely still can be a handful.
The real question is, did you acquire said dog before or after Game of Thrones?
Oh, good question. When did Game of Thrones come out?
It's been a while, but I hear there was a big uptick in Husky proliferation.
Oh, that's a thing? I thought that was some allusion to the show or something. I've not seen it, so I was like,
I wanted a husky my entire life. Like the first time I saw a dog with blue eyes, I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Right?
Yeah. So since I was like a little kid.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we got him in 2017, I think.
That was peak Game of Thrones, but that's good.
We did get the Game of Thrones comments quite often when walking around.
That's cool. Well, as you know, around here we like to kick off with kind of what we've been working on and focusing on the last week or so. So, Taylor, you never get a chance to talk. Why don't you go first?
I really appreciate you saying that, and it has been recorded, so it's true. I rarely get to talk. No, it just as far as work goes, just the same old. I feel like I finally gotten back into the groove where for a while, past couple of months, it's been like a lot of troubleshooting stuff, like stuff breaking, or app integrations and stuff like that, where you're trying to work around a lot of people's code. And I feel like this week I've finally gotten back into really just being able to like build stuff, which is really fun. So that has been exciting. As far as working on like newer stuff, just a lot of meta objects. Like I said, like I've been excited about finally getting to the point where I'm like, I can wrap my head around this like really well now. Like it's just like part of my workflow. And I'm like, every time I hear something, I'm like, how can I make this work with meta objects? Because I can now. So that's been kind of nice. And then, just working through a store launch that's was supposed to happen earlier this week, but we had an issue with an app that worked great in dev as a dev store, but after the transfer and everything, all of a sudden, like it was not working at all. It was just one of these apps that helps kind of like with like local delivery, and they use this other API I'm not familiar with, OpenCage API, for estimating distances instead of the Google Maps API. And for some reason, it worked great in dev, like no problems whatsoever. After we transferred the store over, everything broke. And so like we talked to the devs about it, and they're just like, well, it works fine with Google Maps API, so just get the merchant to get a key and do this. And we're like, well, that's an extra layer of complexity we were not planning on. So like this worked and now it doesn't. Like this is a developer problem. Like y'all need to like help us out here. So that wasn't cool that it held up the launch and didn't make us look awesome. But got it figured out. And so everything's rocking and rolling there for that. So looking forward to summer because we're kind of ramping down a bit. And the folks, hopefully by the time this episode airs, my back deck will have been built. So I did get someone to paying somebody to build it because I was thinking about it. And my wife was like, this is one of those projects that you're like, I'm going to knock out in a couple of weekends, and it ends up taking 6 months to a year. And we need a deck sooner than that. And so I was like, all right. And so that part has started. So that's nice. I'm looking forward to it. Sun's been shining, been outside so much. So that part is lovely. So
nice.
That's my week in a very, very long series of nutshells.
Thanks for the update. Adam, how about you? What have you been focusing on this last week or so?
Well, we are about a week and a bit from Mother's Day. So for Wrapped, a gift option app, it's a busy time.
Huge, right, yeah.
So opposite of Taylor, we are not doing too much coding day to day right now. It's more just kind of support and keeping an eye on things. Mother's Day is probably the second big gifting holiday of the year. And I know the UK does like an earlier Mother's Day than us, so we get like a little blip, but this one seems to be more worldly. So yeah, kind of managing support. The weather's also getting really nice, so trying to be outside a lot more. Just enjoying the sunshine. It's been it was a long, dark winter. And then leading up to Mother's Day, we've been working on, the latest version of the app, which has actually reduced our support load significantly, which is pretty awesome as well.
Nice.
So yeah, all kinds of things going on.
Well, we'll be sure to dig into some of that app stuff here in just a second, so I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah. No, I'm trying not to.
I know, I can tell. Oh man, so much to ask. So for me, I'll go next. Honestly, it's been a little quiet on the Shopify front this last week, which I don't mind because I had been neck deep in checkout extensions and functions for that. Did have one new function to deploy. Basically, it was the same functionality but for a different store, and I feel like similar to you, Taylor, in terms of feeling more comfortable with meta objects, I'm starting to get a little more comfortable with just the traditional flow of spinning up a function and getting it installed on a merchant store and all that sort of stuff. Because the tutorials on Shopify site are nice, but sometimes like getting all the pieces stitched together in a nice flow takes a little bit of just familiarity with what's happening, and I feel like I'm starting to get there, which is nice. And then I had a client contact me out of the blue to do like what should be like a 15-minute edit. Like, oh, this is not Shopify related. This is a different system. And I was like, totally, I'll take care of it. And then I can't get into the EC2 instance anymore. Like the public key login with SSH just stopped working. And so now I'm like an hour into debugging. Like, why is this key no longer working? And potentially having to like reset up a new instance to be able to reset the key on that instance and this and that. Like, but there's those moments where like this should have worked and it worked a month ago. It doesn't work today. Like, what changed? And I know how to reset it, but I feel like I ought to figure out what the problem was because who knows what's actually going on. So
it's always those ones where you're like, this is 15 minutes. And it's just like,
yeah,
the narrator, it was not 15 minutes.
4 days later.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, with that, I would say let's kick it over and get into the meat of the topic today that people want to hear about, which is everything Adam. So, Adam, as you know, and as I warned you, one of the things I love is kind of context and history and understanding how someone became the superhero that they are today. So what was your origin story? How did you get into development, and specifically Shopify development? Help people make that connection between just a normal everyday Joe and the superhero developer sitting in the room next to us.
Cool. Yeah. I started writing software for the web in 1999. That was the first time I was paid to do freelance projects. So it's been a 25-year journey, which is crazy. Absolutely crazy. It doesn't feel like it. It's like
you don't look like it either.
Feels like 3 years. And it's always been heavily focused on backend technologies, server-side technologies, a little bit of dabbling in DevOps and front-end stuff. I'd say, from like 1999 until 2013, when I joined Shopify originally, I was working in lots of small companies, some startups, had a couple companies myself. everything all related to web. So kind of moved through that, and then Shopify was just like a big, here's a company with hundreds of people working on it already. So that was an incredible opportunity.
Now, did you go to school for development, or did you kind of self-taught, or how did you even get into the skill set?
I went to school for design, but self-taught software development.
Nice.
Lots and lots of late nights reading code and refreshing. Like way back in the early 2000s, it was a lot of PHP work. So it'd be, test, refresh. There wasn't testing. It was just refresh your browser and see what happens, and keep doing that until it worked.
Yeah. Hot reload was not a thing.
It's a brute force trial and error.
That's awesome, man. So what did you do when you joined Shopify? What did you originally join Shopify to do?
So when I joined Shopify, it was through an acquisition. So I was working at a very tiny little 4 or 5 person startup in Toronto. And we were brought in with a larger group, the group that Dan Patricio's on and stuff like that. It was kind of just here's what's happening. I remember like before I think it moved pretty quickly, the acquisition. I remember maybe a month before it was announced to the team internally, I saw Toby walking through the office, and I obviously knew who Toby was. So I like messaged my boss at the time, or the co-founder of the company, or the founder of the company, and was just like, "Hey, Toby's here," and he's like, "Yep, talk soon." So yeah, that was kind of cool to see, and it was a cool experience to go through like an acquisition like that, because it was pretty significant for Shopify to invest in Toronto at that point, because they only had a small 13-person team, I believe. So it was in Toronto.
Right.
When we brought in, I think, 25 people at that point.
Wow.
So yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah. So to your question, when I joined, it was as a Rails developer at that point.
Karl's happy.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I would say like from early in my career, from mid 2000s, I was fully on to everything was Rails. Everything that I was working on, every project was Rails at that point. And it's been that way ever since.
That's awesome.
It's nice to meet a fellow purist who somehow managed to eschew the siren song of the JavaScript framework and program the way God intended.
Yeah.
So
definitely got my chops up on front end technologies. I think it's at this point you can't avoid it, but I still try to hold on to the Rails as much as possible, and even like the app front end is still built with Rails and Stimulus instead of like a React front end. So
really,
now this I really want to dig into. Because we only ever hear about the other side.
Interested.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I completely forgot that that's like not as common as most Shopify apps.
Right. So you started at Shopify in 2013, and then you were there, for a while, and then did you leave to start Wrapped, or like you needed a change of pace, or like what happened there?
So I left in 2019, so just after 6 years of being at Shopify, and I left, took some time off, started a company with one of my very best friends, Gavin, and we built an app. It was our first experience. I'd say we probably started building that about 6 months after. We both kind of left Shopify at the same time. We joined at the same time for the same acquisition, and kind of were deciding what we wanted to do next. And we built an app. It wasn't really taking off the way we needed it to. So we sort of sunset that. We had like 2 or 3 amazing customers, and by the end of it, they were still paying every month. And I was like, we got to sunset this thing. It's worth it.
Yeah.
And then I kind of went off and thought about do I actually want to spend my time building Shopify apps, or do I want to do something else? And then I was kind of came across the idea of Wrapped, and it was like, I know it's not like an original idea at the time, but every other experience I've seen doing this type of app is not good. So let's just see if I can make something simpler, easy to use. It should just run itself and I won't have to do any support.
Right.
And then I learned what storefront support is really like. And it's, yeah.
Yeah, the no support thing does not exist. But yeah, you're not wrong though. So that was interesting. Like, so instead of trying to like build up something new, you saw something that was like, you knew the need was there. Like, so there was obviously people looking for this, right? Like there were customers, but like the existing experience was very poor, and so you just made a better one.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, you know, you hear a lot of people talk about dog fooding your software, and you know, I don't run a storefront, so that's a little bit more challenging. But I hate wrapping presents holidays. I don't know why my brain just does not compute it. I've watched YouTube videos, and then I'm just like, I'm trying to do something I don't care about, like I don't enjoy doing. So if I build some software that I know every Shopify store in the world will have eventually, then I don't have to ever worry about wrapping presents again in my life.
There you go. It's perfect.
I mean, that's like a take on it for sure.
So tell us a little bit what the app actually does, because you mentioned you hate wrapping presents, but obviously the app can't wrap a present for you.
Yeah, so it's more on the data collection for the merchants. I wish it could. It's just like a way of organizing the data, collecting it in an extremely user-friendly manner from a storefront. Like every single day I'm working on it. If I notice something that doesn't look good on a theme, or if the theme is overriding something in the app, it's like hot fix goes out right away. We try to stay on top of that. It's just, yeah, it gives the merchants like a really easy way to see what their customers want, and tons of flexibility as well, and how they can collect that information. And some people don't charge for it. It's just a free service. A lot of like the really big brands do that. And then, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So what's a common use case that would solve for a merchant then?
So it's the customer has like a really frictionless way of saying like, I want a specific item wrapped, or I want this order wrapped, or a combination of both, adding gift messages, sender, receiver, all that kind of stuff.
Very cool.
Very, very handy, especially, and that's why. So Mother's Day and so Christmas time would be. I'm assuming, like, right, because of like gift wrapping and stuff, right? Those are the two big ones that you're talking about.
Yeah. So BFCM is total insanity.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot. There's a lot of people who sometimes install the Thursday before Black Friday and are like,
no, but nobody does that. That's,
no,
everybody plans well ahead of time.
You'd be surprised and shocked at like the established brands that do stuff like that, and you're like, come,
yes,
you knew this was coming.
Well, yeah, because someone in marketing all of a sudden is just like, oh no, we need this for a promotion we're doing, like, and so like 2 hours before that goes live, they're like trying to install and set something up. So yeah.
There's a point every year where it's all of a sudden like install rates, revenue, everything just starts to compound really, really nicely. And you start seeing, when you see like a couple repeat stores coming back, it's time to shift focus. There's a couple signals with the user install going on. So yeah.
So do you see people, so with some apps, I know some devs see this too. Do you see like kind of like churn, like in between those big events where people kind of like offload and then they bring it back on for when they need it, kind of type thing? So that's nice that y'all kind of support that or have that mentality or understanding of that too,
Yeah, so the seasonality of like a gift option app is definitely evident. But it's awesome because January comes around, maybe the first week or two, we get a couple support requests from people who are sort of catching up after the holidays, and then it quiets down for a bit until Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is like the first big shopping event of the year where we see significant growth and happiness.
Mm-hmm. And then Taylor's
So
birthday, obviously, too.
yeah, so we have some baked in like time to plan new features and get to work on stuff, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, and that kind of puts you all in a position where understanding like a little bit of the turn, the on and off or whatever, where you can build in the stuff that people are needing kind of in the off season and then have something like really, really nice and polished that's easy to onboard, for when they actually do need it. So that's smart. That's handy.
Yeah, and once you set it up once, it's basically you don't have to do anything unless you want to go in and make changes. Like it'll work forever at that point. It transfers from your dev store to your your dev theme to your production theme. Smooth.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. That's what I'm listening for.
Yeah.
So speaking of transferring, that's interesting because clearly then you're storing all of the configuration data or whatnot on your end, server or database somewhere, right?
Some of it, yeah.
Okay, the reason I'm bringing it up in that regard is the last couple of guests we've had on, there's been a conversation around people utilizing meta objects as a data store, which obviously would be problematic if you're transitioning from a dev store to a live store and expecting all of that information to follow you. But is that something you guys have looked at all, considered?
So, I haven't really done a lot of work with meta objects. It's just been the meta fields side of it. But we do put stuff in meta fields. And we have like a redundant background system that like if you make a change in the app, it's just always going to push it. So there's some stuff that lives in a database on my side. There's stuff that lives in Shopify. Specifically around theme extensions, there's a bunch of configuration you can put in the theme. So duplicating themes copies that over nicely. You don't have to worry about it. Publishing, creating a new theme will copy your live theme automatically as well. That's all built into Shopify, which is great. So it just saves those little extra steps. But yeah, there's always like between two separate Shopify stores, there's different API keys. So there's always going to be a little bit of work to do, but nothing crazy. I'm talking like, hey, can you help us move this from this store to this store? And then like a minute later, I'm like, yeah, all done. Like
it's done. Which is nice especially for like plus brands too, where maybe they're running like one plus org has multiple brands running under their. That's really nice to be able to do that.
Yeah, I wish I could show like the internal tooling we've built. Like that, I spent a lot of time building systems for the app to work better, so I can support it better, make things a lot easier. If I'm going through and like clicking the same things and doing the same stuff, I'll eventually expose that to a merchant front end so that they can do that.
Nice.
I like to feel the pain a little bit too, and then solve that issue.
Well, that's the best way to like create empathy, right? Is like experience that a little bit yourself, and all of a sudden it's just like, oh no, like I know how frustrating this is now. So like, there's a reason that I need to build this in. Yeah, absolutely. So can we talk a little bit about? I say you dug into it a little bit as far as, how the app is built and stuff like that. You want to talk tech stack, a bit. So it's a Rails app, right?
Yeah, Rails app front end is using Stimulus from Hotwire, which is like the Basecamp 37 signals stuff. It's really simple. Really, really simple. I decided to use that when I first started building Wrapped because at that point my React skills were like, they were workable, but not something like I was going to be able to iterate quickly on. So I was like, I'll stick with what I know. I'm going to try this new Stimulus thing. It looks lightweight. The app at that point was literally like one page, like turn it on, turn it off. It was very, very simple.
Because so I haven't had a chance to like install Wrapped. I'm going to work on it on a merchant here that we've got that going. But so is that basically, is most of the config within the theme itself, or is it primarily in the admin?
So the way I split it up, the way I try to organize it is like visual settings. So your font sizes, your borders, your backgrounds, your colors, all that stuff stays in the theme editor, where you can actually like, pick different colors and see it refresh and update right away. I forget when I started using the theme extension, probably 2 years ago. Anyways, we had a lot of configuration in there, so you could turn on and off different features. You could go do a bunch of stuff. It's just not there's not a good feedback cycle there. Like you'd have to use the assets API all the time to scan the schema and see like had the merchant changed anything, is it even turned on? So stuff like that was super painful to experience and work through.
Right.
So now it's just it's all the visual settings, and then the app itself is the configuration. So where do you want to expose gift options? What gift options do you want to expose? Is it tied to a product, or are you just, is it just like a checkbox and gift messaging and stuff like that?
Nice.
So it's kind of how I separate where those settings live. And I think, merchants are responding to that very well. The support for a lot of those things has basically been eliminated in the past month or two, which is a good sign.
Yeah, makes it definitely a lot easier if most of the config for within the theme is actually in the editor, where like they're going to be able to actually see it live, as opposed to, I know some apps, they kind of have like a little like preview in the admin for like what it's supposed to look like. But, if you don't have like the cookie cutter theme that they're using for their preview, then it doesn't look good in context, and you're bouncing back and forth. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'd say like part of the most recent release of Wrapped was to streamline the appearance and functionality of just called like a widget. So there is opportunity to do a preview in the app, but every theme is different, and it's hard to like do that in a way that's not completely weird with how it actually looks when they get there. I think that's a more jarring experience for a merchant. It's like if you preview something and it looks one way, and then you open up your theme editor and it's like, this doesn't look the same.
It's totally borked, and you're like, what?
Yeah. And it's usually just like a really aggressive CSS rule from some third-party app that's like overriding everything.
Like someone's setting like a z-index value to like 8,000 or something, or you're like,
or just like all divs, no borders, and you're like, why? Why is that an important CSS rule for the entire storefront?
So
yes, you're talking about my weeks here. Yes,
going back to the Rails issue, if you don't mind.
Sorry. We didn't talk about Rails enough. I am sorry. I will stop.
So it definitely felt like in the early days, obviously Shopify began as a Ruby shop, and a lot of the tooling around it was very Ruby centric. It feels like in the last several years it sort of shifted more to React, and they've made some decisions to kind of settle in some of the technologies as sort of the primary driver for a lot of the external facing tooling. So what have been some of the trade-offs that you feel like you've run into in terms of sticking with Rails in this more React centric world? Are there any gotchas, or has it been harder or easier?
So when I first started, it was easier because Polaris at that point was pretty simple to use. You had to do a little bit of extra work to get the Polaris styles loaded into your app through the Polaris package, which is like you're introducing this JavaScript build tool just to get Polaris styles at that point. But yeah, I think originally it was easier, and the app was so simple that the dependency on Polaris was not like a factor at all. But at this point, it's kind of tricky. As you want to do more complex interactions for the merchants, having a React front end probably would have been a better choice, because it seems so much easier to update, and stay up to date with the Shopify Polaris releases. It's like, you're just upgrading a package at that point, maybe changing a couple of the components you're using. But when you have it all based out of HTML, there's a lot more to go and adjust. And there is Polaris View components for Rails developers, which is an awesome package as well. And I've played with it a little bit. I don't need like a full package like that, because we have like a pretty structured, at this point, we have a pretty structured UI. So it's minimal component usage, which is nice. It's like badges and containers and cards.
Excuse my ignorance, but I don't know if this has changed now. I mean, I know in the beginning, you didn't necessarily have to embed your app admin API or admin interfaces. You could have the user come over to your site, right? Then you didn't need Polaris necessarily or any of that stuff. Has that changed? Do they not require that it's hosted on Shopify?
Last I checked, you need to be an embedded app in the Shopify admin to get built for Shopify status, BFS. But like, as long as I can remember, you could have an app that did both. You could have an app that kicked you out of the admin.
Gotcha.
It just depends on the use case. Like for Wrapped, it doesn't make any sense to have a standalone thing. But if you're a service that is integrating with multiple different platforms, not only Shopify, then it's probably, a better opportunity to remove the user from the admin. But it's a risk. You kind of want to keep them in the admin.
Yeah.
That could be a really great transition to talking about Built for Shopify.
It could. All right, Taylor, go for it. Jump on it. I see you.
So that was the reason when we talked about like months in the making, right? Like this is back in March. Like you had tweeted. I think I was asking some folks on Twitter about like there's this whole back and forth, right? On like, is Built for Shopify worth it? Blah 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 kind of type thing, because there's some folks, it's a pretty significant overhaul of their existing app that works great. Everything's great, but you obviously have to like now conform then potentially to your app to meet these specific standards that Shopify has set in order to get this awesome badge. And so that was kind of your feedback initially, was hey, like we got Built for Shopify, yes, and even going through the process was actually pretty good, because even though you were incredibly experienced having been at Shopify and being very familiar with like utilizing Polaris, y'all even talking about like not using React at all and figuring out how to get Polaris working and stuff like that. To me, I didn't even realize that was a thing. So even knowing that, just going through that experience, you learned a lot. And so I don't know if you can talk about that experience, maybe starting at maybe when y'all decided, hey, like Built for Shopify is something we really want, and then taking a look at all the work that it's going to take in order to do that, and then going through that process, what that looked like for y'all for Wrapped, because Wrapped is Built for Shopify.
We are officially Built for Shopify since August 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it took longer only because of me. I sat on it for a bit. I just submitted it for review. The feedback I got immediately was really good, but I knew it was going to be more than like an hour of work. It was going to take a little bit of time to rethink some of the UX in the app. But yeah, it first of all, it's totally worth it. In case anyone's wondering still, the question comes up so much in Twitter,
yes, all the time.
It's worth it. Shopify is basically, you gotta like watch out for the signals that Shopify sends, especially for the partner platform. It's just, they're showing you what they want an ideal app to do. They show you what they want ideal partners to do. And it's, you should pay attention to that. You should kind of make your own decision about what's best for your company and your business yourself. But stuff like Built for Shopify is a no-brainer. It's just, yeah, totally worth it.
Yeah. So for y'all, it wasn't even much of a, it's like, hey, here's this Built for Shopify thing. Like, we need to be Built for Shopify.
It's like, hey, what apps want an advantage over other apps? Do this. Yep. So for me, I saw that and I was like, this is so sick. I can't wait. So I went through the initial kind of submission. We received some feedback, which was great. It was just like, you're using all these components in a way that shouldn't be used, which is fine, because I was, building HTML components using Polaris styles and trying to hope for the best.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like, the UX wasn't crappy because of it. It was just, we had used like annotated layouts in a way that was not supposed to be done that way. Mm-hmm. For like all of our pages, we're using these annotated layouts.
So it was more like design feedback specifically, or implementation?
It was the usage of the Polaris components. So
okay, gotcha.
Like one thing I always say is like, Polaris design system is incredible. It's amazing. It's well thought out. It works really well for what it needs to do for Shopify admin and apps to tie in and look very, very similar. So when you're thinking about built for Shopify, the main thing is Shopify wants your app to be your own app, but also not a jarring experience for the merchant.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've all opened those apps that are using like Polaris V10. There's purple buttons everywhere. You're like, what the heck's going on? What are you doing? You know, so it's a it's good.
Yeah, and that staying up with built for Shopify and that integrated experience or whatever just makes it feel like you're keeping up in step with what Shopify is doing too. So yeah, like not just totally avoiding that jarring experience like you were talking about. And the same thing, like we were talking about, like embedded versus those where you're kicked out to a totally different web page or whatever kind of type thing. It's a whole deal, because now you've got another tab in your sea of tabs that you have to navigate back and forth and then get back to your admin on. So,
and if you're running multiple shops, it's a nightmare because what shop did you log into to open this weird app that kicks you out into its own tab? So it's never clear. Yeah.
So you got the initial feedback back from the folks doing the reviews for BFS, and you saw that it's going to take a little bit more work maybe than just real quick submission. Got the work done and resubmitted. So how long did that whole process take from initial submission to feedback to updates to pushing that back?
I think over a month, but the first round of feedback came and I was like, cool, I'm not ready to shift priorities right now to work on that. So
you'd be just going into Black Friday, right? Like at that point, if like that started back in August. So like you're probably more focused on your big season than like trying to get that done, right? Yeah.
It's like we'll get feedback at BFCM that gives me work for the next 12 months basically, or the prep for, and that's how it was at Shopify too. In a lot of ways, we would go through a BFCM, we'd get a ton of work. And then it was like January, BFCM prep started again. Like, what are we building? When is it going to launch? It has to be out in the summer. It has to be out in the spring, all these types of conditions, requirements. So I sat on it. I was just like, all right, I'll get to it eventually. And then July showed up last year and I was like, okay, we're starting to see the bigger, plus agencies come around again. They always show up midsummer. They prep early, which is nice.
Yes.
Most of them.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, this is probably the best time to get that done. So like worst case, if it's a couple of reviews and it takes a while, we'll have it at some point before BFCM, which would be great. And I remember I was at the grocery store at the beginning of August and I got the email and it was like, congrats, your app is built for Shopify after resubmitting it. I think we did 3 submissions in total.
Okay. Gotcha.
It was like a Monday night or something. It was like the grocery store was quiet and I was just like jumping around excited. This is so cool. It was just like, for me, it was like proof the app didn't suck. Like it was just like, we've built it to a specific standard and it's approved and we're really happy about that.
Yeah, which is wild that somebody with your experience and background and already success with a successful app is still like, yes, like that was cool to have that badge, that stamp of approval there. So
it changed everything for us. It was just like that hit, our app went to number 1 and it's remained at number 1 in its primary keywords, like the top keywords for it. So
that's awesome.
It's been a great experience for that as well.
Nice.
You have to think though, as like if you're getting installs from the App Store, a lot of merchants are going to see those badges and eventually start thinking about higher quality. If you're not built for Shopify and you're an embedded app, you're kind of like, are you even actively developing this thing? Like what's going on?
Well, even from a merchant standpoint. So, like I help merchants, set up shops or, I have to find solutions that are app specific at times too. And, so from my perspective as somebody who's pretty aware of like Shopify in general, like I have friends, right, who build apps that I can just be like, okay, like for this use case or whatever. But when I have to go searching for one where I don't have an actual personal referral, it is hard to find what you want and sift through all of the options. And so now, like the built for Shopify filter, like just bam, like it's real easy. Like you can just, I don't want to look at 200 apps. I can check this box off and now I'm down to 15. So like I'm going to look at 15. Like that's just what it's going to be. I can't sift through 200. And so I think merchants are going to catch on to that too, for sure.
Yeah, it's a good signal for merchants just of like the quality. It's one of the review cycles that so far I haven't been like opening an app and being like, how the hell did this app get BFS? Like so far all the apps, even if I'm like, I don't like the app, it's still, you see the badge, you install it, you're like, you know what to expect or what you would hope to expect. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you see apps and you're like, how did this app make it through the submission and get into the app store, first of all? But with BFS, it's like, I haven't really been finding that. So like the review team is really, really on it.
Yeah, they're on top of it.
Think of them as experts of Polaris components, like how to use those. They follow the style guide. They know it inside and out. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure of like the internal team structure, but I'm assuming they're close. They work closely with the Polaris teams.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some apps that I have trialed that was like, who was asleep at the wheel when this thing got onto the store? So, I get that. But it's like not the case for built for Shopify.
With Shopify apps, after the review, so much can change. It's not like there's no bandwidth available to like go look at 10,000 apps and make sure everyone's exactly the same or all changes have been submitted. So yeah, stuff can change quickly after the app is approved as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Is there anything?
I've been asking a lot of questions. I don't know if you want to jump in.
Starting. Sorry. For someone starting from scratch with a new app, what's that look for, Taylor? Is there anything they should keep in mind in terms of like, would you suggest targeting built with Shopify right from the get-go?
It depends. I don't think I would have strived for built for Shopify right away. Like from the first, so when I launched Wrapped, it was September 2021, so right before BFCN. But you don't know if it's gonna, like, if you're even gonna get usage out of it, right?
Yeah.
So I think it would be better to make sure like merchants actually want to use your app and let it be clunky for a bit. It really doesn't matter if like the first 1,000 merchants are, not experiencing the world's best app. Like at that point, you're probably attracting really small, early stage merchants as well. So there is some flexibility to kind of expand and grow. And, if people like it and keep using it, you buy yourself more time to keep working on it. Then it's probably worth it. But initially I would just use Polaris, try to follow the style guide, read the documentation. It's really thorough.
Mm-hmm. So try to make that like the MVP almost, so to speak. And then like kind of when you've proven the use case, like then get built for Shopify. Because at that point too, like you'd have a little bit of a baseline too.
Yeah. And like there's something so special about going from like position number 3 to position number 1 in your primary keywords when you get that badge, because they definitely, I don't know if it's been like publicly admitted or anything, but it definitely seems like the BFS badge helps you in App Store rankings for sure. But yeah,
I just wondered if it's easier sometimes to start with that goal in mind than have to add the extra work later. But it sounds like there's enough extra work that if you're still validating your idea, that maybe you just get it out there and ship it and then worry about it later.
Okay. Yeah. Make sure people want to use it before you spend the time to do it. I mean, the earlier you do it, probably the better. You have less legacy to transfer over. Because there's a lot. There can be a lot. It's Polaris is a really good design system, but it's incredible how far off it can go with people who aren't paying attention to the intended uses of components and how and where they should be. Like even, I think that tweet that you're referring to, I even mentioned like myself and Ashley both worked at Shopify, and we knew what Polaris was, we knew how to use it, and there's still things that like I didn't know until through the review. So
good. Well, there are lots of topics I'm sure we'd love to dig into, including your time at Shopify and such, but we're also kind of getting to time. So I just want to double check. Is there anything you want to make sure that we talk about here before we transition to Taylor and his what's happening in the world segment?
I think kind of we touched on it earlier, but officially BFS built for Shopify is worth it. I just want to reiterate that. Let's like avoid asking the same question over and over.
Stop asking the question, right?
It's worth it. Just do it.
Literally everybody that has gotten it has said like, yeah, it's worth it. But people are still asking the question. So
I mean, you never know how much work it's going to take an app to get to it, but it's worth it.
But you're saying that primarily from a place solely about how it impacts your ranking on the App Store.
I think that's definitely a huge benefit to it. I like to know that when a merchant installs Wrapped, they see BFS, they see the badge, they kind of have an expectation it's going to be of a certain quality level. It holds me accountable. It gives a better experience for the merchant. So
I just question over time as more people begin pursuing that badge if that will lessen or not, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and I think you'll see, like we were re-reviewed at one point as well.
Oh.
And
oh wow, I didn't realize they did that. Okay.
Yeah, so it was kind of a sudden and like unpleasant experience, but I woke up one day and it was like, your app is no longer built for Shopify, and I was like,
what?
All right, so it's just going to be like back and forth constantly. I believe it was just like a mistake, and we were able to get to support, and they were able to turn that around very quickly. But yeah, the ranking went down when I was gone. Like there was a couple other apps that usurped us from number one, and we had to, fight for that badge and make sure like everyone was on the same page. And then, and we got it back, moved back into the position within like a few hours, and it was good. But yeah, so I think over time, the team will probably grow, and there'll be more people re-reviewing apps or like holding app developers once they have it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, Taylor, what you got for us today?
Yeah.
What's happening?
There's just a couple of quick things in the change log. So especially since we're running a little long, we'll just hit a couple of items real fast, and then after that we can bounce out. But to the picks of the week. So this is Adam. This is your official warning to have something locked and loaded for your pick of the week. But so in the changelog, I don't know if y'all had seen this too, but there was now an update here for image and swatch presentations for product filters. So you can now create these visual filters with image presentation using the Shopify Search and Discovery app, which is really neat. So I did see too. I forgot to actually like grab the link and stuff, but Shopify was even hiring for someone for search specifically. So I think this is like a new area of focus that they're starting to invest a little bit more. I don't know if y'all have played around with it a little bit. I think we talked about it the last episode, Karl. I can't remember, but I needed just a little bit of help adding basically metafill values for search results for different products. There's not a way to do that natively at the moment without the search and discovery app. So you can actually add product boosts to get metafilled values associated with search for some things that we're doing there or whatever on a product, instead of someone just searching for like the title or something like that or whatever of a product for that to show up. So this new option here, being able to add some visual filters as well, is really, really interesting. So I haven't played around with it a little bit. And so other than just like making a note of this is something that I saw when I was going through here that I need to play around with, that's out there. And we'll link this up. Hopefully I'll have played around with it by the time this comes out. Another call out too was there was an update as well. GraphQL admin API. Oh no, my keyboard's asleep. but support for metafield connections in online store objects. So online store article, blog, and page now, you can use metafield and metafield definition connections to get access to these. I guess before you could only do that with the REST API. And so now you can do it with the GraphQL admin API. So that's handy. Metafields for everything. Everybody loves it. It's what we're all using. So, and then a couple of other like real quick ones. I saw this originally from a tweet from Patrick Milligan. He's the guy over accounts over at Shopify. Or customers, I'm sorry. The new customer accounts with the new checkout extensibility stuff that we have to be using. But now there's a webhook topic for customer account settings. So when someone changes over from like a classic to a new customer account, that's scheduled for release effective July 1. And Patrick also noted that there would be a way basically for folks building apps specifically for like customer accounts. You'd be able to, so this could be a thing, Adam, potentially, customers who have a preference for, getting their gifts wrapped or, some kind of upsell on orders after the fact kind of type thing. There's going to be a way too for when the merchant installs your app to tell whether or not they're using classic customer accounts or the new customer accounts, which rely specifically on customer account extensibility, which still a lot of stuff just in dev preview, not a whole lot of stuff out in the wild on that yet, but it is coming. So if you're working in customer accounts, definitely be aware of that. And then another one that's coming out, last one here real quick, being able to write metafield values available on the customer account API as well is something that's going to be available and effective July 1st. And so you'll be able to use the metafield set mutation to assign different metafield values on customer, order, company, and company location resources. And so that will be also super handy for, again, apps that are using metafields, specifically for customers here. So that will require a access update for scopes, read-write access to metafield definitions in order to have access to that for your app. So we'll link that all up in the show notes, but the last two were just scheduled coming out here. So those should be live hopefully by the time this episode comes out. I forgot to check and see when this one's coming out, but July 1 is the date for these this new customer account stuff coming out, available for everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Taylor, as always.
Yeah.
So we like to end our show here with our pick of the week, a chance for each of us to kind of share something interesting, exciting, doesn't have to be development related. And so Adam, have you had a chance to think about yours?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to do this one. I'm rereading this book called Shoe Dog.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's the story of Nike shoes. It's a good entrepreneurial story of, someone starting out and how they were thinking about things. And I've read it once before. It was totally inspiring. So highly recommend picking that up and reading it. It's a pretty easy read too.
That's my list. That does sound interesting.
It does sound interesting. I've never read it before, but I've heard lots of good things. So yeah.
I don't read books multiple times usually, so this is a good sign.
I was going to ask, is that like a normal thing? You go back. I've got a couple books and I'm like, every couple of years I'm going to read this because it's a good refresher for something or whatever. But so yeah,
it's definitely worth it.
Nice.
For my pick, I'll go next. My daughter, both my kids, my daughter in particular enjoys writing stories. And she'll be 9 here soon, and she's writing some really good stuff. And so one of the things I wanted to show her was a way to kind of bring programming into it a little bit. And so we've been exploring how to write interactive fiction, which, it has some basic linking in it and some basic variable setting, even some macros or functions like we can start adding to it. So I've been exploring different frameworks to support that and finding one that would just be easiest for us to work with. So we finally settled on one called Twinery, or actually it's called Twine. Website is twinery.org, and it's a super simple runtime. You can use several different sort of frameworks, and basically you type in stories and use some basic conventions, and it will be able to output it as HTML that you can then basically run through it in a browser. So very simple, easy for her to kind of wrap her head around, to start writing and do some basic, almost markdown like syntax for links and stuff. And away she goes. So if you're looking to get into that, I recommend it. Yeah.
So my pick, and I don't think that I've picked this before. It's possible that I have, but I don't know if y'all use Arc internet browser at all, but it is just awesome. And so someone was talking about it the other day, and I realized it has this nice little deal too, where you can just, Command S. I think you can set up different hotkeys or whatever, but it like basically goes full screen. So the orientation for the Arc browser, it's got like all of the navigation stuff off on the left hand side. So it's got a vertical bar instead of like the top horizontal bar. So it's much more of like a full screen experience when you're using it. I just really like how they have different, like, you can set it up where, I can't remember what this is called. Like they're just basically different profiles that you can like just swipe through. And so I have one for the podcast where I dump all the links on, so that way I've got everything up and ready to go. I've got a personal one, I've got a work one. So it's not my like main driver as far as like dev goes or whatever. I still primarily use like Chrome, Firefox, and Safari in that order. And so, but it is nice to just have up for a lot of like personal stuff, and then I can really easily separate work from personal. But they relatively recently, I think like last week maybe, released for Windows as well. They were previously like Mac only. Now it's also available for Windows. So I feel better making it as a suggestion since it's got better support for the whole gang. So yeah, Arc internet browser, pretty cool.
You've always been very inclusive. We appreciate that about you, Taylor.
I'm an includer. It's I took a strengths test in college, and that was one of my top 5 strengths. I'm an includer.
No one asked.
I'm a middle child. I don't want anybody to be left out.
Awesome. Well, Adam, we really appreciate you spending the time with us today, getting to hear your story and learning more about the app. And, really appreciate that you see Rails as the penultimate framework and the way to go. So thanks for verifying that for everybody listening. And for you, our listeners, thanks for tuning in. I hope you learned something about Shopify development. Hope it was encouraging to you on your journey. And Adam, if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that? To pay and download your app or Twitter? Or
Yeah, talk to me on Twitter. That's where I keep that open all day long usually.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
Twitter's a good spot.
Awesome. And we'll link your stuff up in the show notes, so it'll be there for everybody.
Yeah.
All right.
Or install the app and just message me on support. And
there you go.
Chat there.
I'll do that. DDoS them and support. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you later. Take care.